issues. And that border is a open sieve for not only people, some of whom work on one side of the border and live on another, some of whom live on one side, shop of another, but a huge amount of goods comes up the St. Lawrence Seaway, supplies our automobile manufacturers in the Detroit area. We have a major problem here, and I would like to request...
Let me insert a couple of points there quickly.
Yes,
because
sir.
Number one, several of these terrorists apparently entered the United States across that border. That's point number one. Point number two, over these last few days, things have clamped down a lot. I gather the weight now for some of the trucks that are coming across with the very goods you're talking about. And they used to be able to cross that border with hardly any weight at all. Now it's taking 6 hours for the trucks to get across. Let me bring General McKenzie into the discussion. It means that this open border that we have always cherished between our two countries, I don't know, does it mean that the border can't close, or that we have to consider the Canadian border is really to be an extension of the U.S. border?
Well, I would argue, and not an expert in the field, but I would argue there has to be some harmonization between the two. As soon as you create a sort of dueling legislation for border crossing, then naturally the Flotsam and Jetsam of the world, with some really nasty people included, are going to head towards the place where it's the easiest to enter. And I mean, there's great debate going on in our own Parliament about the fact that I guess there is no evidence from the FBI that these folks came across our border into your country, but that doesn't mean they haven't in the past and they won't in the future.
Well, this guy was picked up in Vancouver last year.
Yeah, that one. Yeah.
Now, Ted, let me make a specific suggestion and see what General McKenzie thinks about it. I think that NAFTA is essential to our economic strength, and those 6-hour truck lines you talked about are untenable in the long run. But we're going to have to choose between wrecking our economy or protecting our security. It's a hopeless choice. The suggestion I would make, just to throw out, it's going to require very high-level Washington-Ottawa coordination, is a single security perimeter for a single economic zone. And there's the Mexican side of this will also have to be dealt with. But Canada appears to be more critical.
That's actually what I was talking about a moment ago. I don't think I said it very clearly, but that, in other words, the border of the United States would in effect be the extended border of the outer limits of Canada, so that we would protect the whole thing as a unit. Is that what you're proposing?
As I understand it, and I'm not an expert on this, but as I understand it, the Canadian standards are often laxer, and I have been told flatly today by a Coast Guard commander who studied the problem that there is no real examination of the cargo containers of these ships coming up the St. Lawrence and bringing stuff into the United States. That was part of NAFTA, and it was going to be more efficient. So the only thing to do is for our two countries to recognize that we're equally at risk, equally targets, and work together in something along the lines of what you just described.
Let me just tick off. Yeah, go ahead, General McKenzie.
Well, I was just going to interject. I mean, if the stuff's coming down the St. Lawrence and going into the States, then obviously there's a requirement for Americans to check that. If it hasn't been checked appropriately coming into either of our countries, in this case into our country. So I would absolutely agree that there has to be a common objective out there on the horizon of a common policy for North America. Getting there is going to be painful. There's going to be all kinds of do-gooders and critics that try and maintain, quote, sovereignty, unquote. But the fact is, from an efficiency point of view, and I reiterate that after the next disaster, it unfortunately will be a lot easier to bring everyone on side. Right now, you still have some doubters that this was a one-off, and obviously it probably wasn't. But I would agree that a common North American NAFTA entry process is a desirable final objective, yeah.
General McKenzie, Ambassador Holbrook, I'm very grateful to you both. Thank you for coming in this evening. When we come back, we'll have a late-breaking story with chilling details of the first hijacking on the morning of September 11th. Breaking story now from tomorrow morning's Los Angeles Times. The newspaper has gained access to an FBI document detailing a telephone call from a flight attendant aboard American Airlines Flight 11 leaving from Boston. That was the first plane to hit the World Trade Center. The flight attendant, Madeline Amy Sweeney, told a ground manager, and apparently this was with the calmest voice, this plane has been hijacked. She said that 2 flight attendants had been stabbed and that, and this is a quote, a hijacker also cut the throat of a business class passenger and he appears to be dead. Sweeney then relayed the exact seat numbers of 4 men, said all 4 were Middle Eastern, and 1, she said, spoke English very well. Investigators say there were actually 5 hijackers on the plane. Apparently one of them was not seen by Ms. Sweeney. Eventually she told her manager that they had gained access, the hijackers, to the cockpit, and that the plane changed direction and was descending rapidly. The manager on the ground asked Sweeney whether she knew her location. Her reply at this point, "I see water and buildings. Oh my God, oh my God." At that point, according to the report, the conversation ended. Sweeney was 35 years old, the mother of 2 young children, and what she saw at that point was apparently the Hudson River and the World Trade Center. That's our report for tonight. I'm Ted Koppel in Washington. For all of us here at ABC News, good night.
The ABC television network extends its thoughts and prayers to those who've suffered so much in this national tragedy. We stand steadfast with all Americans, united in hope and courage.
Get off the phone, Judge.
What? There are things some lawyers will never say.
You're embarrassing yourself and the rope.
I will not tolerate any more disrespect.
And stop shoveling it out.
She is not one of those lawyers. Kim Delaney, Billy. Premieres Tuesday, 10/9 Central on ABC. Viewer discretion advised.
Sometimes picking a winner can be difficult.
But choosing a car with style and performance is as easy as a trip to Maher Motors BMW of North Haven.
Lease a BMW X5 4.4 for only $553 per month. Enjoy the performance and style of a BMW for 36 months with 6017 due at signing.
This year, pick a winner you can take to the bank. The ultimate driving machine.
From Maher Motors BMW of North Haven.
Tommy, you know what mystery meat is? Well, that's what's in these formed and pressed nuggets that you've got here. You could be having KFC popcorn chicken.
KFC's crispy popcorn chicken is back. Get an individual size for only $1.99 or a party size for $6.99.
There's fast food, and then there's KFC.
He has a power.
You couldn't know?
To predict the future.
Believe me, I know.
And to pass his gift to another. Anthony Hopkins. Hearts in Atlantis. Rated PG-13. Sneak preview this Friday and Saturday starts September 28th.
Meet Generation Now. We are your new networking partner. We are the farmers of the new technological frontier. We are the captains of cross-platform compatibility. We are the swamis of Silicon Super Connection.
You are morons who never answer the phone.
Need a networking partner who runs their business like a business? SNET Data. We're on it.
Wishing you a happy and healthy new year from News Channel 8.
Good evening and welcome again to Politically Incorrect. Let me introduce our panel for this evening's show. This is Mr. Larry Gelbart, probably the most brilliant writer of thoughtful comedy in, I don't know, several generations. This week, also a good friend. And this is Roy Romer, who was the governor of Colorado, now the superintendent of our schools here in Los Angeles, and I've been a long-time admirer of his. And this is Stephen Collins, an all-around smart guy, political activist, actor, novelist. It's a very thoughtful panel, and there's a lot of issues I want to get to. Before I do, I have to address Monday's show, and I should clarify a few things that were said. You know, this show has always been off the cuff. That's the beauty of it. It also causes problems because you say things which you need to explain more. But, you know, these are sensitive times, and I should have been more clear when in a discussion of how we have in the past conducted our war on terrorism, I said, we have been the cowards lobbing cruise missiles from 2,000 miles away. And the problem there is the word we, I think. It's indistinct, and I should have been more clear. And so let me be very clear now. In no way was I ever intending, because I never think this way, to say that the men and women who defend our nation in uniform are anything but courageous and valiant, and I apologize to anyone who took it the wrong way sincerely, and I'll get to that. But my criticism was for the politicians, mostly, who, fearing public opinion, have not allowed the military to do the job which they are absolutely ready, willing, and able to do. And now that they can, I have no doubt they will do what they have always done and get the job done. But, you know, a lot of people now think that patriotism means just marching in lockstep and shutting up. And I'm sorry, but, you know, when the same terrorists who committed this heinous crime against our country a week ago, those same people, when they blew up 2 of our embassies in Africa 3 years ago, I know it's Africa, and I know that's a long way away, but that was still hundreds of people died, and embassies are American soil. And our political response was to blow up a pharmaceutical factory in the Sudan from far away. And I am not unpatriotic to question how our government has handled this situation in the past. Patriotism does not involve shutting up. It involves speaking out. Okay, so... So I would invite your comments on all this and about the necessity, or if you don't think so, for dissent at this time.
This country was founded on dissent. This country took issue with the way we were being governed. And if we stop now, it's a giant leap, not only backwards, but into some kind of dark America that we never knew about.
Yeah, the countries that don't allow dissent are the countries that harbor terrorism. So
yes.
I think that, you know, the spirit of the dissent right now, and you're being very careful tonight, and you're being very sensitive to the way people take your words, and I think that's great. I mean, but we're going to keep debating. This is a country that second-guesses everything. Monday morning quarterbacks everything. It's part of our system. It's how we're sure that we've done things right, or how we learn not to make the same mistakes.
Right.
We've got to do it.
And I'm sorry, please.
Yeah, well, I think you're dead right. Dissent is necessary, but one of the problems is we don't know what we're dissenting against right now. I think the nation's really reaching for what is the appropriate response. And I think your point that military action, I'm a former member of the Air Force. I was a lawyer in it, so I don't want to take credit for flying. But in terms of military response, you got to recognize that there is a cost of human life. And I think the point that was being discussed prior is that the political community, I think, has had a problem of how much human life can be expended in order to protect our nation. We got a new world here, a new piece of history, and I think that we have yet to figure out how we can protect democratic values and how far we may have to go, both with military action, but also, I don't think you're fundamentally going to solve this problem unless you reduce the level of hate. And I think we need to look both at what we do in a short run on punishment and holding accountable, but the long run. Remember that picture of those students in Pakistan, you know, who were saying, I'm learning how to hate America? We got to get at that problem also.
Or what about the picture? I mean, yes. You mentioned how much we can take. I remember when we went into Somalia. Now, you may disagree with the action to go in there at all, but when one picture of an American soldier who was killed there came back, the decision was made politically here in America that we did not have the stomach, and we withdrew our troops for that endeavor.
It was politically incorrect to show a dead American soldier.
Right.
But Bill, just to go back to the beginning of tonight's program, you know, the president himself admitted that he misspoke when he called this a crusade.
Yeah.
So I think, I'm not equating you with the president.
Thank you.
But
and I am rooting for him. I said that last night.
If we don't root for him,
yes. I mean, you can root for him without reserving your right to shut up about what he's doing. We have the right to say, we should, excuse me, Mr. President, I think we should handle it this way.
And excuse me, Mr. President, don't call it a crusade, because that's very inflammatory to the Muslim people. But just to we are, as you say, groping. We're feeling our way along. And I think we do ourselves a great disservice, perhaps a fatal disservice, if we start having a pissing contest about semantics, because in the face of a real enemy to go after, we're going after each other.
You know what, I must say thank you for bringing that up, because I find it cowardly that a couple of people took a buzzword and made it an issue when there are real issues to think about. I mean, we did the show Monday. I did 10 interviews after the show with all sorts of press people. Nobody mentioned this. Nobody mentioned it the next day. I got 50, 60 calls, messages. This is a couple of people who smell a controversy, and to use this tragedy to do that when nobody thought that what I was criticizing the military themselves. And our government deserves some criticism for the way this has been handled. And I have been a major supporter of the military on the show. I have argued with the liberals about this time and again. I've been the only one on this panel many times who said the government's #1 priority is the military. Pay them more, respect them more, give them more. I'm the guy... Anyway.
This is exactly what we need, though. We need these continuous town meetings on this level, without pundits, me accepted, of course, for people to express themselves, however haltingly or whatever. I mean, we need to vent, and we need to, and God bless this show for being here for that.
And we need,
let me say, but, you know, look, we really need to be very thoughtful. As a head of a school district, I've been trying to say this is a teachable moment. We can learn a lot, and it's a terrible tragedy. But let me say, we need to be patient, and we need to be deliberate about how we respond. I think we have to be very forceful. You can't allow this to continue, but we need to remember that there are very many Muslims in this world that are going to be watching very carefully how we respond. And I think we have to respond, but my plea is be very thoughtful and careful. You know, we ought to talk to the Russians about what their experience was in Afghanistan.
They're telling us.
But you know, a week ago, I didn't know that Afghanistan is already in ruins. It's in rubble. It's been destroyed. I mean, the people are starving. There's nothing much we can do to them. A week ago, it seemed, you know, the response of let's go get them made sense. Interestingly enough, in the last few days, the rhetoric coming out of the White House is more reasoned. I mean, I think the White House is starting to hear us. It's starting to hear the debate. It's starting to realize that no one's going to look soft if they go about this slowly. I think, frankly, it probably creeps out the terrorists a little more that we didn't take bin Laden's bait and go right for the button.
I don't think so. I don't think so, respectfully. You know, Ronald Reagan said they can run, but they can't hide. Well, they ran and they hid.
Yeah.
You know, and for
And
all the saber rattling, you know.
How is that disagreeing? I don't understand how you're disagreeing. I'm missing something.
I forgot what I was disagreeing about. I came right from home and we were.
Because I totally agree that they have hidden, absolutely.
And Colin Powell said we're going to cut it off and we're going to kill it in the Gulf War. Remember that? Well, we didn't kill it. It crawled away and it still lives. And of course, we're talking about Saddam Hussein.
Yes.
So I think it is dangerous when you pump up people with some rhetoric that you can't follow up on.
Well, the president is pumping us up, and I think, right, you know, to a certain degree, he's right. But then Colin Powell and other people are saying, have patience, have patience. Well, it's a kind of a cross-purposes preparation that we're receiving.
Well, but I think it's also great that they're not telling us everything, and the media has to get used to the fact. You know, the media for the last generation coming out of Watergate and Vietnam got used to the fact that they were entitled to every bit of information that they could get and that they should regurgitate it right to the American public. And I think some people in the media are a little shocked now that they're not being invited to do that. But can you imagine trying to plan D-Day, you know, in the age of 24-hour news?
No.
We can't do it, and we've got to respect that. And I love the fact that the White House and Powell are being very clear about that.
Okay. I have to take a commercial. We'll be back. Those of you who are just joining us, I wanted to mention that that chair is empty all week. We announce this each night for Barbara Olson, who is a favorite guest of ours and a friend, and she was supposed to be here last Tuesday night. She was on one of the planes. So we leave that open in tribute and cherished memory for her. Now, we were starting to talk about the president. At the end of last night's show, I compared him to Shakespeare's Henry V. If you don't know the play, as I just remember the bare bones of it, but Henry V becomes a great king from being a sort of a dissolute young man. He drank a lot with Falstaff.
That's why they call him the Fifth.
That's why they call him the Fifth.
But you know...
Right. And it took a war to transform him from the guy who drank with Falstaff to this great king. And the great line from the play is, he says, "Presume not that I am the thing that I was." So do you think our president is becoming Henry V?
Let me say, I think he is responding very well. I served with him as governor. I'm rooting for him. I think we all are.
We are.
Absolutely. But let me, you know, I think that the mobilization of the goodwill of this country is very necessary. But let me add a constructive comment. I think we need to be careful about the rhetoric, if I can use the word, that we use. I mean, his speech about we're going to root out evil in this world, I think needs to be narrowed. We're just, it's too broad a target.
That does raise the bar a little.
It's raised it.
That could be the Democrats too, you know.
And the other thing is, you know, I want him dead or alive. You know, I understand that follows a great Western tradition which the cowboy can identify with, but let me tell you, we need to be very resolute, very tough, but very sober. And the other thing we need to add is there is another dimension of this that we got to heal, and that is you can get all the bin Ladens in the world, but you're still not going to solve this problem unless we close this gap of hate.
Yes. And we're going to,
You know, Bill?
Yeah, and Friday I'm going to have 3 young Islamic men here to ask that one question. Why do they hate us? Yeah.
Bush had a moment last week that made me think, you know, that your Prince Hal thing is apt. When he was doing the press conference and he almost broke down. And then he recovered and spoke very strongly and totally off the cuff, nothing prepared. And I looked at him and I said, that's the man we want to see. A man who's full of the feeling and the impact of this, but who's still decisive. And I thought, you know, when JFK came to office, he was a spoiled rich kid who had not done anything in either the House or the Senate. He had introduced no important legislation. He'd done nothing. His father probably bought the election.
Right.
And then, you know, the Bay of Pigs came along and sobered him up, and the missile crisis came along, and who knew? Harry Truman was a joke when he came to office. He was a joke.
Right.
We were in despair that this man had become president.
Ronald Reagan, people used to joke about.
Yeah.
As, you know, he was an actor. How could he be a president?
Well, that's a good question, but anyway. Not about Reagan, but how could an actor be a president?
Yeah.
2 things. Harry Truman, by the time he became a senator, had read every book in his hometown library. A couple of times. He mispronounced words because he never heard them said.
He wouldn't have been good on TV, and so we, you know...
Well, fortunate for him,
he didn't have to be.
He had Milton Berle to go on for him. JFK was quite a good scholar as well. Now, with no disrespect and no dissent and no treasonable feelings of forethought, George II is not really a great improvisational speaker. He was wonderful at the cathedral during the services when he read a beautifully prepared script. Wait, let me just, I'll be through in an hour. But I think I would advise him as a citizen who didn't vote for him, but as one who's voting for the country, to say as little off the cuff as possible. We're going to get more crusades, dead or alive, run them into the ground, those kind of Reagan-esque, unfortunately, lines that he may not be able to deliver on. I would just, he's got to be a better communicator than he is, and he can only be that, I think, if his material is prepared, which is fine, because he has none of the Churchillian or Rooseveltian flair.
You know, I actually don't agree, because I think the moment that I was speaking of, which was not, in which he didn't speak out of turn at all, was just what the American public needed, and the fact that he dared to speak off the cuff, I think, when he was obviously feeling that much, was a very healing moment.
He was good in New York, too. When
he was great.
With the
but
bullhorn,
Stephen, he's not going to be able to be emotional from now on. We want facts or what they can tell us.
But he has to, you know, he has to grow into this moment, and he has to take the chances, and we have to hope that he's got billions of people.
When anyone can get on an airplane, for whatever reason, leave their bags, we should have nationalized that long ago.
Security.
It's the silly safety that we care about.
Bill?
There's a lot of silly safety, you know. The asbestos in the World Trade Center that they took out, that wouldn't have killed anybody, but would have prevented that fire. But Yes.
You talk about the government, and the only thing I take issue with is that the government, and particularly in terms of our defenses and the CIA, that was us. I mean, we are the government. The government really is the collective consciousness, whether we like it or not, of the country. And we, and particularly my generation, our generation, the children of the 60s who thought we'd achieved world peace, said to the CIA, don't do that, that's unsavory, don't hire those people. We ridiculed them, we handcuffed them, we made it hard for them to do their job.
But if they were leaders, they would have said, shut up, children, we have a job to do. That's what leadership is.
But we get the leaders that we deserve. We get the leaders we asked for.
Safety. I mean, the airlines and the security system there, we absolutely have failed. And I think we need to beef up our intelligence system. But this is a time in which we need to be thoughtful about what do you give up in order to protect yourself. You got to give up some, but don't do too much.
But before we go there, how much was the CIA's budget last year? Was it in the neighborhood of
30 billion.
30 billion.
I think that's around the budget.
It's somewhere there. I thought it was more, but it's been advertised as that much. I mean, I think we have a right to expect for that kind of money some measure of
But we've told them,
central intelligence.
But we've told them not to do it in a way. We've told them, please don't do it in a way that won't play well on TV if we get caught. And you can't hamstring them that way.
I know, but they're the plumber. They got to fix the sink, okay?
We hire the plumber.
I know, but we aren't the plumber. All right, we'll have this debate on another night. We got to take a break.
After the 270 horsepower Chevy Trailblazer, everything else just seems kind of weak. The all-new Chevy Trailblazer, like a rock.
If new Body Smarts was just a new nutrition bar with 17 essential vitamins and minerals, it would be dumb to show you images like this. But since new Body Smarts tastes as good as it is, good's not such a dumb choice. Introducing delicious new Body Smarts. Sweet just got smart.
I want 50,000 in cash and a cold beer now.
You have ropes in your bedroom?
Tony, your crutch is vibrating.
Thieves, Friday, September 28th at 9/8 Central on ABC.
New Barilla Pasta Salad Dressing. The first dressing that treats your pasta salad like pasta, not salad. Barilla Pasta Salad Dressing. Your pasta's never had it this good.
Dworkin, the Chevy Giant, is going to make September a month to remember. Want proof? How about this? Get up to $5,000 off Chevy Tahoes and Blazers, $4,000 off Chevy Silverado, and great savings of $3,000 on Chevy Malibu. Want more? Get 0.9% on Chevy Venture vans. Dworkin, the Chevy Giant, must move 100 cars in 10 days. You won't find a better deal anywhere. The best deals are at the Giant. Pick up the phone and dial the hottest number in town. Do it today. Call Dworkin for a September you won't forget. Hurry, offer ends September 29th.
George Hart Infinity, offering some of the most luxurious cars on the planet at the most attractive prices in Connecticut. Treat yourself to a richly appointed Infinity with supple leather and lavish detailing. Indulge in Hart's exclusive total dealership experience, including free loaner cars, roadside assistance, and more. Take advantage of 3.9% financing and special manufacturer lease programs on new 2002 Infinities, like the all-new 350 horsepower Q45. George Hart Infinity in West Haven. You gotta have Hart.
All right, I'll just leave you with Edward R. Murrow. We must not confuse dissent.
Really on the brink by about 2:30 this afternoon. And then some buyers came in, intrepid buyers, I might say, came in and began to push up the prices of shares. These would be the big institutions, insurance companies, mutual funds, pension funds, and banks and the like, trust funds and the like. And so there were some buyers there. Whether we'll have follow-through tomorrow or not, anyone can guess in this kind of fragile world. Here are some of the widely held stocks, and of particular interest here, many of those stocks were way off earlier in the day and then came back. Particular interest.
Help us? We need directions.
It comes with an extraordinarily well-insulated cabin.
Why is it so hard to meet chicks anyway?
The window!
I do not know.
Amazing, but true.
While supplies last, get special APR financing as low as 3.9% for 36 months on 2001 Civics.
Come to HSBC for the investing ideas and guidance you need to grow your dreams. HSBC, your world of financial services. A unique 5-door design. Formula One style E-Shift. Introducing the IS300 Sport Cross from Lexus. Totally unexpected. At your Lexus dealer.
President Bush speaks to the nation and the latest on the investigation at 11.
This is an ABC News special report. President Bush's address to Congress. Now reporting from ABC News World Headquarters in New York, Peter Jennings.
Good evening, everyone. This is a very important national occasion, the most important speech the president has given to the American people. What does he intend to do now in the fight against terrorism? How does the president plan to make the United States a safer place? What greater role will the federal government now have in people's lives? Congress is gathered. This is already being referred to in the White House as the Bush Doctrine. The president, who will arrive momentarily, has sat down with his staff and considered this message to the world very carefully. He will talk tonight in detail about American principles, who the enemy is, and who it is not. In this and every other nation, what he says and how he says it will have a huge impact. Thank you for joining us. There is enormous anticipation in the Congress tonight. There has just been a great round of applause for the mayor of New York, Rudolph Giuliani, and the governor of New York, who have arrived to join the president as his special guest with Mrs. Bush. And I want to just ask very quickly, Linda Douglas, how tight is security?
It is very tight, Peter. There have been helicopters circling overhead, military jets flying overhead. The Capitol's been essentially locked down for several hours, where it's really difficult to move through the Capitol at all, or if you do, with a police escort.
Okay, thanks very much, Linda. As Linda says, the tightest security ever, and in fact, Speaker of the House agreed that the majority leader of the Republicans in the Congress stay away, and the Vice President is not there this evening as well. Mrs. Bush, Governor Pataki, and right beside her, Tony Blair, the British Prime Minister, who's been to see the President today and is here tonight not only as a representative of Britain, but as a guest of the Bush family. Terry Moran, well, I'll ask you in a moment to join us, because I think Bill Livingood, the House Sergeant-at-Arms, is about to introduce the President.
Mr. Speaker, the President of the United States.
Terry Moran, our White House correspondent. I assume that everybody at the White House realizes what an enormous occasion this is.
Absolutely, Peter. One top aide said it is an educational responsibility, and by that he meant that the president is going to try to answer questions that Americans have about what went on and identify who is responsible for these attacks in a way that might assuage fears, fix the target. He's also going to make some very strong demands on the Taliban regime in Afghanistan, demands that they probably will not meet.
The President comes to the Congress tonight with a an overwhelming reservoir of goodwill from the country and everybody who has worked on Capitol Hill. If you notice, Tom Daschle, the Democratic leader in the Senate, right there behind him, everybody has remarked time and again, Senator Schumer of New York, just how different the environment is on Capitol Hill than it has been for many, many years. President saying good evening to members of the Supreme Court on his way by. Outgoing chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, other members of the Joint Chiefs. The American political and judicial establishment is all here. We've heard the president many times this week, often very spontaneously. This is the time to hear him after he has sat down and considered the entire notion of what, as I said, the White House is referring to as a Bush doctrine. Senator Byrd of Virginia, the Democrat, and the chairman of the House, Speaker of the House, Dennis Hastert.
Members of Congress, I have the high privilege, the distinct honor of presenting to you the President of the United States.
This in itself a demonstration to the world that in times of adversity, the political establishment is one.
Mr. Speaker, Mr. President pro tempore, members of Congress, and fellow Americans. In the normal course of events, presidents come to this chamber to report on the State of the Union. Tonight, no such report is needed. It has already been delivered by the American people. We have seen it in the courage of passengers who rushed terrorists to save others on the ground. Passengers like an exceptional man named Todd Beamer. And would you please help me welcome his wife, Lisa Beamer, here tonight.
Mrs. Beamer, who's pregnant, said her new child would know about the father's bravery. How strong.
We have seen the state of our union in the endurance of rescuers working past exhaustion. We've seen the unfurling of flags, the lighting of candles, the giving of blood, the saying of prayers in English, Hebrew, and Arabic. We have seen the decency of a loving and giving people who have made the grief of strangers their own. My fellow citizens, for the last 9 days, the entire world has seen for itself the state of our union, and it is strong. Tonight, we are a country awakened to danger and called to defend freedom. Our grief has turned to anger, and anger to resolution. Whether we bring our enemies to justice or bring justice to our enemies, justice will be done. I thank the Congress for its leadership at such an important time. All of America was touched on the evening of the tragedy to see Republicans and Democrats join together on the steps of this Capitol, singing "God Bless America." And you did more than sing. You acted by delivering $40 billion to rebuild our communities and meet the needs of our military. Speaker Hassert, Minority Leader Gephardt, Majority Leader Daschle, and Senator Lott, I thank you for your friendship, for your leadership, and for your service to our country. And on behalf of the American people, I thank the world for its outpouring of support. America will never forget the sounds of our national anthem playing at Buckingham Palace, on the streets of Paris, and at Berlin's Brandenburg Gate. We will not forget South Korean children gathering to pray outside our embassy in Seoul, or the prayers of sympathy offered at a mosque in Cairo. We will not forget moments of silence and days of mourning in Australia and Africa and Latin America. Nor will we forget the citizens of 80 other nations who died with our own. Dozens of Pakistanis, more than 130 Israelis, more than 250 citizens of India, men and women from El Salvador, Iran, Mexico, and Japan, and hundreds of British citizens. America has no truer friend than Great Britain. Once again, we are joined together in a great cause. So honored the British Prime Minister has crossed an ocean to show his unity with America. Thank you for coming, friend. On September the 11th, enemies of freedom committed an act of war against our country. Americans have known wars, but for the past 136 years, they have been wars on foreign soil, except for one Sunday in 1941. Americans have known the casualties of war, but not at the center of a great city on a peaceful morning. Americans have known surprise attacks, but never before on thousands of civilians. All of this was brought upon us in a single day, and night fell on a different world, a world where freedom itself is under attack. Americans have many questions tonight. Americans are asking, who attacked our country? The evidence we have gathered all points to a collection of loosely affiliated terrorist organizations known as Al-Qaeda. They are some of the murderers indicted for bombing American embassies in Tanzania and Kenya, and responsible for bombing the USS Cole. Al-Qaeda is to terror what the mafia is to crime. But its goal is not making money. Its goal is remaking the world and imposing its radical beliefs on people everywhere. The terrorists practice a fringe form of Islamic extremism that has been rejected by Muslim scholars and the vast majority of Muslim clerics, a fringe movement that perverts the peaceful teaching of Islam. The terrorist directive commands them to kill Christians and Jews, to kill all Americans, and make no distinctions among military and civilians, including women and children. This group and its leader, a person named Osama bin Laden, are linked to many other organizations in different countries, including the Egyptian Islamic Jihad and the Islamic movement of Uzbekistan. There are thousands of these terrorists in more than 60 countries. They are recruited from their own nations and neighborhoods and brought to camps in places like Afghanistan, where they are trained in the tactics of terror. They are sent back to their homes or sent to hide in countries around the world to plot evil and destruction. The leadership of Al-Qaeda has great influence in Afghanistan and supports the Taliban regime in controlling most of that country. In Afghanistan, we see Al-Qaeda's vision for the world. Afghanistan's people have been brutalized. Many are starving, and many have fled. Women are not allowed to attend school. You can be jailed for owning a television. Religion can be practiced only as their leaders dictate. A man can be jailed in Afghanistan if his beard is not long enough. The United States respects the people of Afghanistan. After all, we are currently its largest source of humanitarian aid, but we condemn the Taliban regime. It is not only repressing its own people, it is threatening people everywhere by sponsoring and sheltering and supplying terrorists. By aiding and abetting murder, the Taliban regime is committing murder. And tonight, the United States of America makes the following demands on the Taliban. Deliver to United States authorities all the leaders of Al-Qaeda who hide in your land. Release all foreign nationals, including American citizens you have unjustly imprisoned. Protect foreign journalists, diplomats, and aid workers in your country. Close immediately and permanently every terrorist training camp in Afghanistan and hand over every terrorist and every person in their support structure to appropriate authorities. Give the United States full access to terrorist training camps so we can make sure they are no longer operating. These demands are not open to negotiation or discussion. The Taliban must act and act immediately. They will hand over the terrorists where they will share in their fate. I also want to speak tonight directly to Muslims throughout the world. We respect your faith. It's practiced freely by many millions of Americans and by millions more in countries that America counts as friends. Its teachings are good and peaceful, and those who commit evil in the name of Allah blaspheme the name of Allah. The terrorists are traitors to their own faith, trying in effect to hijack Islam itself. The enemy of America is not our many Muslim friends. It is not our many Arab friends. Our enemy is a radical network of terrorists and every government that supports them. Our war on terror begins with Al-Qaeda, but it does not end there. It will not end until every terrorist group of global reach has been found, stopped, and defeated. Americans are asking, why do they hate us? They hate what they see right here in this chamber, a democratically elected government. Their leaders are self-appointed. They hate our freedoms, our freedom of religion, our freedom of speech, our freedom to vote and assemble and disagree with each other. They want to overthrow existing governments in many Muslim countries, such as Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and Jordan. They want to drive Israel out of the Middle East. They want to drive Christians and Jews out of vast regions of Asia and Africa. These terrorists kill not merely to end lives, but to disrupt and end a way of life. With every atrocity, they hope that America grows fearful, retreating from the world and forsaking our friends. They stand against us because we stand in their way. We're not deceived by their pretenses to piety. We have seen their kind before. They are the heirs of all the murderous ideologies of the 20th century. By sacrificing human life to serve their radical visions, by abandoning every value except the will to power, they follow in the path of fascism, Nazism, and totalitarianism. And they will follow that path all the way to where it ends, in history's unmarked grave of discarded lies. Americans are asking, how will we fight and win this war? We will direct every resource at our command, every means of diplomacy, every tool of intelligence, every instrument of law enforcement, every financial influence, and every necessary weapon of war to the disruption and to the defeat of the global terror network. Now, this war will not be like the war against Iraq a decade ago, with a decisive liberation of territory and a swift conclusion. It will not look like the air war above Kosovo 2 years ago, where no ground troops were used and not a single American was lost in combat. Our response involves far more than instant retaliation and isolated strikes. Americans should not expect one battle, but a lengthy campaign unlike any other we have ever seen. It may include dramatic strikes visible on TV and covert operations, secret even in success. We will starve terrorists of funding, turn them one against another, drive them from place to place until there is no refuge or no rest. And we will pursue nations that provide aid or safe haven to terrorism. Every nation in every region now has a decision to make. Either you are with us or you are with the terrorists. From this day forward, any nation that continues to harbor or support terrorism will be regarded by the United States as a hostile regime. Our nation has been put on notice. We're not immune from attack. We will take defensive measures against terrorism to protect Americans. Today, dozens of federal departments and agencies, as well as state and local governments, have responsibilities affecting homeland security. These efforts must be coordinated at the highest level. So tonight I announce the creation of a cabinet-level position reporting directly to me, the Office of Homeland Security. And tonight I also announce a distinguished American to lead this effort to strengthen American security, a military veteran, an effective governor, a true patriot, a trusted friend, Pennsylvania's Tom Ridge. He will lead, oversee, and coordinate a comprehensive national strategy to safeguard our country against terrorism and respond to any attacks that may come. These measures are essential. The only way to defeat terrorism as a threat to our way of life is to stop it, eliminate it, and destroy it where it grows. Many will be involved in this effort, from FBI agents to intelligence operatives to the reservists we have called to active duty. All deserve our thanks, and all have our prayers. And tonight, a few miles from the damaged Pentagon, I have a message for our military. Be ready. I've called the armed forces to alert, and there is a reason. The hour is coming when America will act, and you will make us proud. This is not, however, just America's fight. And what is at stake is not just America's freedom. This is the world's fight. This is civilization's fight. This is the fight of all who believe in progress and pluralism, tolerance and freedom. We ask every nation to join us. We will ask and we will need the help of police forces, intelligence service, and banking systems around the world. The United States is grateful that many nations and many international organizations have already responded with sympathy and with support. Nations from Latin America to Asia to Africa to Europe to the Islamic world. Perhaps the NATO Charter reflects best the attitude of the world. An attack on one is an attack on all. The civilized world is rallying to America's side. They understand that if this terror goes unpunished, their own cities, their own citizens may be next. Terror unanswered can not only bring down buildings, it can threaten the stability of legitimate governments. And you know what? We're not going to allow it. Americans are asking what is expected of us. I ask you to live your lives and hug your children. I know many citizens have fears tonight, and I ask you to be calm and resolute, even in the face of a continuing threat. I ask you to uphold the values of America and remember why so many have come here. We're in a fight for our principles, and our first responsibility is to live by them. No one should be singled out for unfair treatment or unkind words because of their ethnic background or religious faith. I ask you to continue to support the victims of this tragedy with your contributions. Those who want to give can go to a central source of information, libertyunites.org, to find the names of groups providing direct help in New York, Pennsylvania, and Virginia. The thousands of FBI agents who are now at work in this investigation may need your cooperation, and I ask you to give it. I ask for your patience with the delays and inconveniences that may accompany tighter security, and for your patience in what will be a long struggle. I ask your continued participation and confidence in the American economy. Terrorists attacked a symbol of American prosperity. They did not touch its source. America is successful because of the hard work and creativity and enterprise of our people. These were the true strengths of our economy before September 11th, and they are our strengths today. And finally, please continue praying for the victims of terror and their families, for those in uniform, and for our great country. Prayer has comforted us in sorrow and will help strengthen us for the journey ahead. Tonight, I thank my fellow Americans for what you have already done and for what you will do. And ladies and gentlemen of the Congress, I thank you, their representatives, for what you have already done and for what we will do together. Tonight, we face new and sudden national challenges. We will come together to improve air safety, to dramatically expand the number of air marshals on domestic flights, and take new measures to prevent hijacking. We will come together to promote stability and keep our airlines flying with direct assistance during this emergency. We will come together to give law enforcement the additional tools it needs to track down terror here at home. We will come together to strengthen our intelligence capabilities to know the plans of terrorists before they act and to find them before they strike. We will come together to take active steps that strengthen America's economy and put our people back to work. Tonight we welcome two leaders who embody the extraordinary spirit of all New Yorkers, Governor George Pataki and Mayor Rudolph Giuliani. As a symbol of America's resolve, my administration will work with Congress and these two leaders to show the world that we will rebuild New York City. After all that has just passed, all the lives taken and all the possibilities and hopes that died with them, it is natural to wonder if America's future is one of fear. Some speak of an age of terror. I know there are struggles ahead and dangers to face. But this country will define our times, not be defined by them. As long as the United States of America is determined and strong, this will not be an age of terror. This will be an age of liberty here and across the world. Great harm has been done to us. We have suffered great loss. And in our grief and anger, we have found our mission and our moment. Freedom and fear are at war. The advance of human freedom, the great achievement of our time and the great hope of every time, now depends on us. Our nation, this generation, will lift a dark thread of violence from our people and our future. We will rally the world to this cause by our efforts, by our courage. We will not tire, we will not falter, and we will not fail. It is my hope that in the months and years ahead, life will return almost to normal. We'll go back to our lives and routines, and that is good. Even grief recedes with time and grace. But our resolve must not pass. Each of us will remember what happened that day and to whom it happened. We'll remember the moment the news came, where we were, and what we were doing. Some will remember an image of a fire or a story of rescue. Some will carry memories of a face and a voice gone forever. And I will carry this. It is the police shield of a man named George Howard, who died at the World Trade Center trying to save others. It was given to me by his mom, Arlene, as a proud memorial to her son. It is my reminder of lives that ended and a task that does not end. I will not forget the wound to our country and those who inflicted it. I will not yield. I will not rest. I will not relent in waging this struggle for freedom and security for the American people. The course of this conflict is not known, yet its outcome is certain. Freedom and fear, justice and cruelty have always been at war, and we know that God is not neutral between them. Fellow citizens, we'll meet violence with patient justice, assured of the rightness of our cause, and confident of the victories to come. In all that lies before us, may God grant us wisdom, and may He watch over the United States of America. Thank you.
President of the United States warning the Taliban in Afghanistan that if they do not give up Osama bin Laden and all those who work with him, they will suffer the same fate. Telling the rest of the world that you either are with the United States and its allies, then you will be against the United States. Telling other nations that any one of them that continues to harbor or support terrorism will be regarded by the United States as hostile. Telling the United States military that the hour is coming when the United States will act and that they will make the country proud. As he speaks to the members of the Supreme Court, asking the country to uphold the values of America and remember why so many have come here. As he speaks to other important congressmen and senators on important committees dealing with this, he asks their continued participation and confidence in the American economy. And in naming tonight Tom Ridge, the governor of Pennsylvania, to head the Office of Homeland Security, reporting directly to the president, saying to the citizens of the United States that he will do whatever it takes to protect their safety. And saying that he and his administration, the country, and all law enforcement agencies in the country will come together to give law enforcement the additional tools it needs to track down terror at home. Whether the president said we bring our enemies to justice or bring justice to our enemies, justice will be done. I have several of my colleagues with me this evening and would like to hear their impressions of the speech. And I'm going to start with George Stephanopoulos.
Peter, the president asked the country to be calm and resolute, and tonight he led by example. He was resolved, he was reassuring, he was sober, he was strong, and to me, he's never seemed so convinced before, never seemed so convinced of his cause, or so convincing and deliberate. He described a war that will be long and difficult and different, but he also described a war that can be won, and I thought one of the interesting sentences in the speech was, he said this war will not end until every terrorist group of global reach has been found, stopped, and defeated. That is an objective he can meet because, of course, of the qualification of global reach. You define the enemy, you define the goal.
The president comfortable with himself and with the country. In Washington, Cokie Roberts.
Peter, this is what we're seeing right now. The president walking out and shaking these hands. He came down, put his arm around Tom Daschle, the Senate Majority Leader, then made a point of walking down an aisle through the seats to greet Kwesi Nkrumah, a former member of Congress, now the head of the NAACP. This is a moment of unity that he has not had in his presidency, and the coming to the Congress created this for him. When we thought we could have lost the dome of the Capitol in this terrorist attack, it really got to members of Congress. When they came back from their bunker that Tuesday, they looked up and said, thank God it's still here. And the fact that it might not have been, you think about it, Lincoln kept the dome being built through the Civil War, Roosevelt kept it lit up through the World War II. The importance of coming to the Capitol, coming to the Congress cannot be overstated.
Right beside Cokie Roberts tonight in our Washington Bureau, ABC's Sam Donaldson. Sam?
Peter, this was a fierce speech. It sounded fierce. The president looked fierce. I mean, if you look back at the old film of Franklin Roosevelt asking that Congress for a declaration of war, you do not see the same type of fierce presentation. I mean, you look at it, Peter, and you think of Shakespeare, cry havoc, let's slip the dogs of war. Well, I think that's probably what the country wanted to hear. The mood of this country is very angry. The president could not have gone forward and seemed to be mild in his presentation. On the other hand, I suppose there are those who worry that now this administration, this country, all of us have to deliver, have to come forward, and in fact, Osama bin Laden must be brought to justice, hard to find as he may be in Afghanistan, assuming that's where he is. Other terrorist groups must be rooted out, perhaps even harder to find them. A war the president said would last for years must be fought. And when he turned to the military and said, be ready, you will make us proud. It's going to be the kind of declaration, the kind of fierceness that has to be followed through. If there isn't a follow through, it's going to be a terrible, terrible letdown.
Thank you very much, Sam. Before we actually leave the Congress itself, I want to hear from ABC's Linda Douglas, who covers the Congress on a daily basis for us. The relationship between the president and the Congress has been transformed in many ways.
Oh, it really has, Peter. The reason that you're not seeing me now, by the way, is because they've asked us to turn all of our lights off for the president's departure. I cannot emphasize to you how tight the security is. This relationship has fundamentally transformed because they were so partisan to begin with. But it's really more than that, Peter. This is very real. I talked to the Majority Leader Tom Daschle the other day, who told me that he's speaking to the president now on a daily basis, sometimes for 10 or 15 minutes at a time. The president is asking his advice. And what you saw in the hug that took place between the president and the Majority Leader Tom Daschle was real affection.
We're not just all journalists here this evening. We have several guests who have listened very carefully to this for the message that it sends, not just beyond the country, but beyond, not just beyond Washington, but beyond the country. We're joined in Washington by the chaplain, the Muslim chaplain at Georgetown University, Imam Yahya Hendi, who's in our Washington Bureau this evening. Imam Hendi, the president spoke very explicitly and directly, not only to the nation's Muslims, but to the world's.
Yes.
And how effective do you think he was in this particular regard?
Well, I think he did very well in terms of, number one, making that there's a distinction between Islam and terrorism, that Islam is a religion of peace, a religion of justice, and he also urged the American people to be cautious, not to jump into conclusions and to go after Muslims or Arabs in America. But I believe he needed to be more aggressive or more assertive in that message. There are international students in America who decided to leave America in the last few days because of the tragedy, out of fear. I need to hear him more clear in terms of his message to the American people, because there are 240 cases so far of Muslims being attacked, being discriminated against. I needed a clear message to the American people from him, I guess.
Thank you, Imam Hendi, very much. We're also joined by the president of one of the nation's foremost universities, Brown University in Rhode Island. Ruth Simmons is the first Afro-American president of a major Ivy League university and therefore sees this, I think, from a variety of perspectives. President Simmons?
Well, Peter, I'm so touched by the president's speech. I think it was a stirring, moving performance, and he touched all bases. He rallied the country. He talked about compassion. He talked about respect for different religions. He talked about the need for Americans to be strong and to face the future. So it was an incredible performance, and I think that most Americans can feel very proud of the Congress and the leaders of the country tonight.
Sam Donaldson referred to this, I think, as an aggressive speech, or certainly a very forward-leaning speech. You talk to university presidents all over the country. You know the American college student body well. How will it go down on the campus?
I think it will be mixed, of course, because young people are going to naturally be concerned about the future that they're going to face. That is to say, what kind of war are we looking at if, in fact, we are going to see combat? What will it mean for them? They're very much concerned about the kind of future that they will inherit. So I think that they're going to want to analyze the president's words very closely. They will pay attention to intent here. They'll pay attention to whether or not the words that he spoke encompass all areas of the world and compassion to all groups, because young people care deeply about this. But at the same time, many of them want to see the country rally around our armed forces and support the inevitable conflict that will arise. And so I think that it will be very mixed on our campuses.
Many thanks, President Simmons.
Thank you.
The President spoke very specifically about the economy and about airline safety and the condition of the nation's airlines. We're joined by our business correspondent, our business and economic correspondent, Betsy Stark, tonight. Betsy, you talked to the business community. You've heard the debate about how much government should get involved in trying to give the economy a boost. How do you think it will be received in the business community?
Well, Peter, I think there are certain industries in this country that are in such deep financial trouble. The airlines, as you suggested, travel and tourism, that they want to know what Washington is going to do for them right now so that they can stay in business, so they can avoid more layoffs. Those kinds of specifics were not given tonight. They were not expected. Beyond that, I think the business community was looking for enough show of leadership from the president, enough of a sense of a specific plan of action that it will begin to restore consumer confidence in the future. And consumer confidence is absolutely key to the economy. We heard the president ask Americans to show their confidence by continuing to participate in it.
And Lisa Stark, who covers the aviation industry for us and the Federal Aviation Administration. The president spoke, among other things, of the Marshals Program. In the last week, how much progress has the nation's aviation network made in making it safer?
Well, they've certainly started to add many more air marshals. About 50 will be ready to roll this weekend. They anticipate they'll be training at least 100 more every few days starting next week. But there's a lot more to be done, and both the Transportation Secretary and the head of the Federal Aviation Administration acknowledged that today on Capitol Hill under very sharp questioning by lawmakers. They acknowledged there is much more to be done, and they promised that they would do it. Peter?
Thanks very much, Lisa. While we're in Washington, I want to talk to ABC's Claire Shipman, who covers the White House for us. Claire, the president said at one point, from this day forward, any nation that continues to harbor or support terrorism will be regarded by the United States as a hostile regime. Should we be taking that as the Bush doctrine?
I think so, Peter, and it's interesting because this was a very firm message to the international community, and it's not necessarily the message those abroad wanted to hear. Moderate Arab nations, even NATO allies, were not looking for a lot of bellicose language about war. They weren't looking for ultimatums, but that's what they got, and that's what they've been hearing in private. In fact, the only thing that I think some of the nations abroad, especially the moderate Arab nations, were looking to hear was the fact that this is not a war against Islam, it's not a war against Arabs. They got that part of the message, but for the most part, this is not going to be reassuring to the international community, which was looking for something probably a little bit softer.
Thank you, Claire, very much. Now let us turn to Afghanistan, to which, or to whom, in the persons of the Taliban who run Afghanistan, the president was so direct. Deliver to the United States authorities all the leaders of Osama bin Laden's organization. Close immediately every terrorist base. Give the United States full access to terrorist training camps so the U.S. can make sure these demands are not open to negotiation or discussion. The Taliban must act, and act immediately. They will hand over the terrorists or they will share their fate. We're joined this evening by the retired General Richard Hawley from Newport News, Virginia. Your reaction to that, sir?
Well, Peter, the president set some pretty strong objectives. He defined the adversary. So I think the military and the armed forces got what they needed tonight from this speech. But more important, I think they got a demonstration of strong and united leadership from both the president and a united Congress, leading a united American people, which is really the most important thing that the armed forces need right now at the beginning of what is going to be a very difficult and long campaign that's going to involve more than just the armed forces. There's an awful lot of other agencies and people around the world who are going to be in this with us.
I appreciate it, General Hawley. Thank you very much. I want to turn to our resident military analyst, Tony Cordesman, for, if I may, a brief answer, Tony, on how tall an order is this in Afghanistan.
It is a tall order, Peter, because it's bin Laden, his entire network, and within hours or days, it's the Taliban regime.
That was certainly brief, Tony. Thank you very much. I'd like to get at least a minute or less, if I may, from our correspondent in Pakistan tonight, Bob Woodruff, as to how this will be received in that part of the world.
Well, Peter, the people here were holding out some hope, at least, that maybe war was not coming to this area. The president tonight really foreclosed that completely. This is an ultimatum to the Taliban that cannot possibly be met reasonably. This is a regime that could barely get it together to just urge Osama bin Laden to leave. And now they're asking him to hand him over and also give the U.S. access to their camps. They will never do that. Of course, students of history will remember that World War I began with an ultimatum to the Serbs that could never be met, and we saw what happened there in the beginning of the 20th century. Beginning of the 21st century, war is sure to come here as well. Peter.
Thank you, Bob, very much. Very much appreciate that. We're going to give, speaking of history, the last word here tonight to our much valued resident historian, Michael Beschloss.
Good evening, Peter. I think one final headline is the imperial presidency is back. We just saw it. In the 20th century, during World War II and the Cold War, Congress deferred to presidents. When Eisenhower asked for an interstate highway system, or when Kennedy said, go to the moon, Congress said, if you ask us, we will. Now George Bush is at the center of the American solar system. That was not true 10 days ago.
I thank you. I thank all my colleagues at ABC News. I thank those guests who joined us this evening. Our coverage of this crisis for the United States will, of course, continue. Don't forget Nightline later this evening. I'm Peter Jennings. Thank you for joining us. Good night.
This has been an ABC News special report. President Bush's address to Congress. For continuing coverage, stay with ABC News and abcnews.com.
It's 9:58, and coming up at 11 o'clock, we'll have late reaction to the president's dramatic speech to Congress. Our Jim Dolan is in Washington. Also, a look at what U.S. troops may do on the ground in Afghanistan, and should we rebuild at the World Trade Center at 11.
Hey, look, there's that guy, and there's another.
Start seeing double. Now Lotto gives you 2 games for $1. 2 chances to win millions. New York Lotto. Hey, you never know.
Introducing the next great Jeep idea, Jeep Liberty. Full of innovations and legendary capability.
And now, your eyes are fine.
Nature has never seen anything quite like it. Jeep Liberty, incredibly capable, surprisingly affordable.
What do you call a room where everyone loves to gather? Where a color brightens your entire day? Benjamin Moore calls it mellow yellow. I call it inspired. To make it all come together, I went to my Benjamin Moore dealer for the best paint and the best advice. They've got the color preview studio display to find the perfect color, premium Benjamin Moore paint, and answers to all my questions. Now I have the quality I need and the color I want. What do you call that? I call it confidence.
Benjamin Moore. We make it simple, you make it beautiful.
If you're one who loves the great wide open, Chevy Impala gives you more room than Honda Accord and Toyota Camry, plus seating for up to 6. Impala also earned the highest U.S. government safety rating, 5 stars in front crash testing for both driver and front passenger. Lease a 2002 Impala for as low as $259 a month with 2024 due at signing. Residency restrictions apply. Call for important lease details. So you can have a room with a view that's easier to afford. Impala at your Chevy dealer. We'll be there.
President Bush speaks to the nation, and the latest on the investigation at 11.
Either you are with us or you are with the terrorists.
A House united. The president rallies a nation, calling on America to defend freedom. Rounding up suspects. What did this man know? Did the FBI miss a chance to prevent the attacks? At ground zero, a chief whose friend, the highest-ranking firefighter, raced toward the danger.
You said he was more like Mel Gibson in Braveheart. He was a warrior.
And Afghanistan. Will this treacherous terrain be the next proving ground for U.S. troops? As the country prepares to face an elusive enemy, the children watch and worry.
We don't want to be killing lots of innocent people like they want to do to us.
All tonight on Primetime as America fights back.
And good evening and welcome to another edition of Primetime Thursday, where the news, obviously, a very forceful speech from President Bush to a joint session of Congress.
All eyes on the president tonight as he addressed both houses of Congress. Of course, the Supreme Court was there, the cabinet was there. In fact, everyone there except Vice President Dick Cheney, who was in a secure location, a secret location, and also House Majority Leader Dick Armey, who was also placed in a secure location to watch the speech. Well, in his speech, no question about it, the president issued a worldwide call to arms, talking about making sure that it will not end until every terrorist group of global reach has been found. And he was talking about not just about a year or not just about a week, but he said as long as it takes.
I have a message for our military. Be ready. I've called the armed forces to alert, and there is a reason. The hour is coming when America will act, and you will make us proud. They follow in the path of fascism, Nazism, and totalitarianism, and they will follow that path all the way to where it ends, in history's unmarked grave of discarded lies. Terror unanswered can not only bring down buildings, it can threaten the stability of legitimate governments. And you know what? We're not going to allow it.
And the president said he made the following demands on the Taliban, and he was very unequivocal about those. He said, deliver to the United States authorities all the leaders of al-Qaeda, the terrorist group who hide in your land, close immediately and permanently every terrorist training camp in Afghanistan, hand over every terrorist, give the United States full access to terrorist training camps. These demands, he said, are not open to negotiation or discussion. They will hand over the terrorists, or they will share in their fate.
And that was a huge applause from members of Congress. Let's go to George Stephanopoulos, because, George, I think you and I picked out exactly the same sentence from the speech when he talked about it will not end until every terrorist group of global reach has been found. Were you surprised by the scope of the speech, and what do you think the reaction internationally is going to be?
Well, it was a very expansive speech and a very expansive doctrine, although he does have the asterisk there, Diane, of global reach. That can allow him to define only the most dangerous groups as the enemy in the future. I think what was most interesting is what Charlie also just pointed out, this ultimatum to the Taliban, which in effect is a declaration of war against the Taliban, because these are conditions they almost certainly cannot meet. And we'll see tomorrow what their reaction is. My guess is that probably will create some anxiety in the Muslim world.
All right, George Stephanopoulos. Also want to bring in ABC's John McWethy, who joins us from the Pentagon. John, he asked the question, how will we fight and win this war? And he said Americans should not expect one battle, but a lengthy campaign unlike any other we have seen, but not many details, not many specifics.
Not many details. The Secretary of Defense has not provided many details. It is their plan, according to administration officials, to fight this overtly in some ways, a bombing campaign, and covertly in other ways, and that involves special forces that are going to go after some of these people. This will be a war and a campaign unlike any the United States has ever fought before. It will be an extremely difficult task for the military to get their hands around this one, an extremely difficult task for the public to judge whether or not there has been a success or a failure after months and maybe even years. It is also going to be an extremely difficult task for this administration to continue to sell this after the emotional difficulties of the last few weeks. So, a very unusual military strategy, and it's going to be a tough one.
All right, John McWethy, and as the president said, we will not see each of the activities in this war played out on the television sets. Well, tonight there is news also about the investigation, a key arrest, new threats, and more details about missed opportunities. And Brian Ross has the latest.
That's right, Charlie. It was a day of one big arrest, a continued manhunt for suspects around the country, and a growing realization that there were many, many clues about what happened last week that were somehow just ignored. Paris, not New York or Washington, was the first city where terrorists planned to crash a jetliner into a famous landmark, the Eiffel Tower, in 1994.
The effect would have been the same as the effect in New York City right now. Terror and shock. I mean, we are talking about, you know, the emblem of France in the world.
But the plot was foiled when commandos stormed an Air France jet that had been hijacked by members of an Algerian terror group. And French authorities later learned of their intentions and their connections to Osama bin Laden, according to a former French official who says American authorities were told about it in 1998.
It was known, at least to French intelligence, that bin Laden wanted to crash one plane or several planes into national landmarks, either in France or in the U.S.
And what makes all of that so significant now is the presence of this man in the country since February, a man with suspected ties to the same Algerian terror group known as GIA, G-I-A. His name is Zacarias Moussaoui.
Zacarias Moussaoui was a very high-ranking member of the international branch of the GIA, and he's been on the watch list in France for quite a while.
But what's so disturbing is that 3 weeks before the World Trade Center attacks, Moussaoui was taken into custody by federal authorities on immigration charges in Minnesota.
Just like the real thing.
FBI agents had responded to suspicions raised at a Minnesota flight school, where Moussaoui had come offering lots of cash for quick lessons in a 747 flight simulator. Amazingly, reportedly telling instructors he only wanted to fly horizontally, takeoffs and landings not necessary.
And unfortunately, it appears it was a warning sign for the impending September 11th operations that we missed completely.
The former head of counterterrorism for the CIA, Vince Canestraro, says he's been told the information gathered by FBI agents in Minnesota somehow never made it to Washington.
And there was no way of putting this little piece of the puzzle together with what else was known. But the information that was known in August about Moussaoui, particularly from foreign intelligence services, was that he was a member of bin Laden's organization, Al-Qaeda. And that should have been a very large warning flag if that information had been put together in Washington. It was not.
It appears to be just one of a number of cases now coming to light of botched leads, lost opportunities, intelligence failures.
If we had the information and missed it or didn't act on it properly, that's a bad situation.
Senator Richard Shelby is one of the 40 senators who today toured the World Trade Center site in New York. He is the vice chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee.
We have never dealt with an enemy like this. There will be more unconventional threats and unconventional attacks.
But the FBI is certainly moving fast now, making a big arrest early today at a suburban Chicago convenience store of a man long sought in connection with Osama bin Laden.
We would like to announce the arrest of Nabil Al-Marab, age 34, of Hickory Hills, Illinois.
Al-Marab was a Boston cab driver who moved freely first to Detroit and then Chicago, even obtaining a license to drive trucks carrying hazardous materials and explosives. All at the same time, he had been named in connection with a bin Laden plot to kill American tourists in Jordan. To the great relief of investigators, he is now in custody, the kind of action President Bush promised tonight.
If we don't do this, we're going to be waiting around for the next attack. And people are going to say, gosh, how did we miss that?
Our thanks to Brian Ross. Well, we have a lot more ahead on Prime Time this evening, but before we head to a break, I want to give you the new statistics and that mournful tally of those listed as missing or dead. It has risen. 6,333 now listed as missing or dead, the higher number because it turns out there were so many more foreign nationals doing business in the World Trade Centers than we knew at the time. And of course, when the news of the World Trade Center spread, so many people were drawn towards the site. Some inexplicably, they couldn't stay at home. Among them, an amateur photographer named Alex Camacho, who never goes anywhere without his small camera. And as he headed downtown, he said he didn't know what to do, didn't see anyone to help, so he did what he always does. He took pictures, and here's what he found.
Each block that I got closer and closer to the site, it just got worse and worse. Instead of a window that's smashed, now it's a building that's half gone. I think the worst was just seeing all of the rescue vehicles that were all destroyed. And I knew that the people that drove these vehicles were inside those towers. I remember hearing the firemen saying, they found bodies. There wasn't anything I could do. The only thing I could do was just take pictures.
Total number of survivors found in the World Trade Center rubble, 5. Number of survivors found in the last 8 days, 0. America fights back. We'll continue in a moment.
Meet Mark. Mark marks. Mark's mom, Peg, pledges. Pledge removes marker marks. Pledge stops crayon marks. Pledge gets very high marks everywhere Mark marks. Pledge cleans, conditions, and protects from a world full of marks.
We want an all-expense paid trip to Hawaii this Saturday.
This Saturday.
Sorry, wrong number.
This Saturday, the only place you want to be is the one store that can offer savings like these on brands like these. Sears. Where else?
Dry skin is a nasty little problem, but extra dry skin, now that's a big problem. Fortunately, there's advanced therapy from Lubriderm with special nutrients and vitamins. Advanced therapy. Later, Gator.
One tool rack, 36 tools. Get the long handle tool rack from Rubbermaid.
$34, $51, $45 last month for long distance. How much are you paying? You need Sprint 500 anytime. 500 state-to-state minutes to use any day, anytime for $25 a month. $25 a month is going to help a lot of people. Sprint 500 anytime. The smarter way to cut your long-distance bill. Sign up now. Call 1-800-PIN-DROP.
Time magazine calls The Others chilling. Rolling Stone says it turns the screws of psychological terror.
What do you want?
It sizzles with suspense. Nicole Kidman. The Others, rated PG-13, now in theaters everywhere.
He can barely chew. The pain's excruciating.
He can squeeze you in tomorrow morning.
Saturday.
How about Monday?
This Saturday, the only place you want to be is the one store that can offer savings like these on brands like these. Sears. Where else?
Hey, what you doing?
Playing solitaire?
I can take a hint. Any chance you get?
Ugh, I chipped a nail.
Try to hang on. I'll go for help. Any way you can.
Wouldn't you love to go to Europe?
Yep. Get to McDonald's now and try some of the unexpected new tastes on McDonald's new taste menu.
Honey, do we have a...
Trombone? No, I'll go buy one.
Unexpected new tastes at your favorite place, now on McDonald's new taste menu.
Tuesday at 10/9 Central, you'll get to see the favorite new drama of the season, Philly.
I'm not ashamed of my job.
We should be. TV Guide says Delaney is terrific. This show will be a hit.
You're the real thing, girl. Tell your friends.
Philly, Tuesday at 10/9 Central on ABC. Viewer discretion advised. ABC Premiere Friday, your great escape. First, it's the ultimate mystery you can solve. The season premiere, Mole 2, 8/7 Central.
I'm a thief, Johnny.
Then,
Just like you.
John Stamos and Melissa George.
You have ropes in your bedroom?
The series premiere, Thieves, 9/8 Central. And now that two families are one, everything is perfect.
You're not the boss of me.
Yeah.
The season premiere, Once It Again, 10/9 Central. Part of ABC's Premiere Friday, September 28th, starting at 8/7 Central.
America fights back. Once again, Diane Sawyer.
You heard the president say tonight, again, to resounding applause, we will rebuild New York City. And of course, instrumental to that are the firefighters who have lost so many of their own. Well, for the first time, I had a chance to sit down and talk to the man who is now the new chief of what is possibly the largest fire department in the world. He is Fire Chief Daniel Nigro. And we talked about the new honor he's received, an honor he did not want. Do you remember the morning last Tuesday?
Sure. Beautiful day. We heard it, and then we saw it right from our offices. I responded in the same car with Chief of Department Gansey and recall telling him, this will be the worst day we ever have. It was. Soon after we got there, people began jumping.
You saw them?
In large numbers. So that alone would have made it the worst day we've experienced if it had ended just at that. But it didn't.
Can you get those images out of your head ever?
I haven't yet. Perhaps, but I haven't yet.
And the chief who faced a new kind of crisis above ground may now face one below. The World Trade Center was built on a kind of ring of concrete. If the firefighters dig too aggressively now in the debris, the ring could collapse, letting the Hudson River burst through.
We have not reached down that level of debris removal yet, but certainly it's a major concern for us when we reach that level. It's
How far away are you, do you think?
Certainly days. There are fires, some fires still burning there that are inaccessible to our hose lines. We're trying to keep it cool. It'll burn for a long time.
What's a long time?
Weeks.
Weeks? Months?
I'll start with weeks. No one has ever dealt with anything like this before. So on some of the things I can't turn to page 430 and say, there it is. It's going to be 2 weeks for this one. Don't know.
Nigro is a 32-year veteran of the force, the son of a fireman. He's only been chief since last Monday, taking over for his friend of 30 years. One spirited, the other quiet. One small, the other tall. One missing, the other in pain.
I guess he was my, somewhat my alter ego. He was more gregarious, and he was the short one. We were always together. good friend, golf buddy.
Beat you at golf?
Almost every time.
But he said, I believe, you were a snappier dresser.
Well, he didn't, he was certainly no slave to fashion, and he would be the first to admit it.
He said once, our best career days have taken place together.
Yeah, that's probably true. For the last 10 years, I guess, we've been together a lot. And it was good, a lot of good days, and a few real bad days, and then one real bad day.
In this past week, how many times have you thought to yourself, I'll ask?
Every day. All day.
Nigro and the chief, Pete Gansey, had arrived at the site together, then separated as Gansey went to set up a command post. Nigro circled the perimeter to assess the damage. The first tower collapsed. They both made it through the suffocating debris. Then Pete Gansey raced toward his men at the base of the second tower.
You said the look on his face was beyond his game face. He was more like Mel Gibson in Braveheart. He was a warrior.
Yeah, he knew how to put out fires. He could put them out and hold a conversation with you at the same time. But if they were starting to get the better of us, he got real mad, so he'd get on. He'd get mad at the fire. Well, he was really mad at this fire. And so it was beyond that serious face. It was, I'm gonna get you face, but it didn't work out that way.
He disappeared, as did hundreds of firefighters, including a father and a son, and a firefighter so badly burned in a previous fire, he had just returned to the battlefield.
Knowing what you now know, if we had that situation again and a huge ball of fuel in a plane had hits a skyscraper, will you say, I cannot let my team go in until we know if that building's coming down? Will you have to say it this next time?
I think any fire chief would have to say it. Would have to say, now that we've seen it, this is a different game. I certainly wouldn't be an advocate of everyone moving back to 7-story buildings. We can do this. We can't do it if people fly airplanes full of gas, of jet fuel into us, but under normal conditions, we can do this.
Would you like to see the World Trade Centers rebuilt?
I don't know who would occupy them.
For Chief Nigro, nothing to do but lead, nowhere to go but the place so long his home. Nothing to say but the words of Dylan Thomas, who wrote about the wild men who catch and sing the sun in flight. Men, he wrote, who do not go gentle into that good night.
Do you think about your dad a lot?
Saw him last night. He's helping me through this. He's one of those greatest generation guys that went over to the Pacific in World War II and went back to Korea. Pretty tough guy.
What's he say to you?
He tells me I'm doing a good job. We'll see.
Chief Dan Nigro, and as the president said tonight, in our grief and anger, we find our mission and our moment. When we come back, some parents are surprised by what their children really say.
Proposed cost to improve air travel security, $3 billion. America Fights Back. We'll continue in a moment.
There's a place where I get my favorite Italian sauces with all kinds of pastas, plus all the salad and breadsticks I want. Sounds like Mom's house, but it's Olive Garden and their never-ending pasta bowl for $7.95. Olive Garden, when you're here, you're family.
I just called to ask, how are the kids? And she flowers the kids.
But if I heard right, then you'd come home and say, why didn't you flower my kids?
Am I here right now? This is just me.
No, ma'am. It's the static on your cell phone. Here, Sprint PCS built the only all-digital, all-PCS nationwide network. So your calls are clear.
So no more of this, right?
Not on my watch, ma'am.
2,500 minutes for $39.99 from Sprint PCS.
Ask your doctor or pharmacist about Vioxx, a prescription medicine available from your doctor. Or call 1-877-98-VIOXX for information. Vioxx.
It's so easy.
You'll love Ziploc Easy Zipper. Just easy zipper it, and you know it's closed. Ziploc Easy Zipper. Easy open, easy close. Easy zipper.
We want an all-expense paid trip to Hawaii this Saturday.
This Saturday.
Sorry, wrong number.
This Saturday, the only place you want to be is the one store that can offer savings like these on brands like these. Sears. Where else?
If new Body Smarts was just a new nutrition bar with 17 essential vitamins and minerals, it would be dumb to show you images like this. But since new Body Smarts tastes as good as it is, good's not such a dumb choice. Introducing delicious new Body Smarts. Sweet just got smart.
Lincoln, Mercury, and Ford dealerships offer convenient Saturday hours because your tires, battery, shocks, and brakes are working hard all week, just like you. Our quality care professionals know exactly what your vehicle needs to be at its best. Now get a Motorcraft Tested Tough battery for $59.95, making it easier for you to get an expert under the hood. Quality care service on Saturday at participating Ford, Lincoln, and Mercury dealerships.
The fatal shooting did take place in the senator's home.
This case will be under a microscope.
A season premiere so riveting, it had to be a 2-hour movie event. The Practice, ABC Sunday, 9/8 Central. Raw.
You're gonna make the evening news for stalking your ex-wife.
You're real.
You taught me.
Rough.
My retainer's 5,000. Screw this up. I'll have to have you killed.
Real.
You blew my alibi. Gonna be one sorry.
I'm already sorry.
From the creator of NYPD Blue, Philly. Premieres Tuesday at 10/9 Central on ABC. Viewer discretion advised.
America Fights Back continues after this from our ABC stations.
It's 10:27 and Eyewitness News at 11 o'clock. An up-close look at just how tight security is at local airports in the wake of the terror attack. Also, is the rain hampering rescue and recovery efforts in lower Manhattan? And Sam tells us when it's going to dry out at 11.
With room for 5 adults and fold and tumble seats, make room for the Chrysler PT Cruiser.
Buddy. Here, buddy. Buddy. Oh, no.
Get a Chrysler PT Cruiser starting at $16,500, $20,600, nicely equipped.
Honey?
Go away.
What? Glad to get your birthday?
No.
Our anniversary. Did you find that thing I buried? Did I insult your mother?
No.
Well, what did I do wrong?
Live next door, Mr. Oliver.
Haven't been home much? Slow down with Boston Market. And now try our delicious quarter dark chicken meal with not just 2, but 3 sides and cornbread for just $4.99. Boston Market. Slow down.
You like it?
No. I came here to see something amazing. Where's the world's largest planetarium?
Where's the 300-seat cabaret? Where are all the craps tables?
The new Mohegan Sun. There's nothing else like it.
Will rain hamper the rescue efforts? We'll have the latest from Ground Zero at 11.
America fights back. Once again, Charles Gibson.
This nation's children have seen a lot in recent days, more than they should. We've all seen more than we should. But what are children feeling? And what about parents struggling with their own fears and emotions? How can they answer their children's tough questions when they're not so sure what the answers are? Questions like, am I safe? Mom, Dad, are you safe when you go to work? And will this happen again? John Quinones gathered up some parents around the country to listen to the children, and you too may be surprised by what you'll hear.
She lives in a high-rise apartment building above the streets of New York. Gabrielina Villegas, a 12-year-old, having a tough time going to sleep.
Every time I hear a plane pass overhead close to my building because it's like really loud, I have a bad feeling like it's gonna crash right into my bedroom window.
She's not alone. It's been 10 days now since the attack. And for kids across the country, not just New York, the nightmare won't go away.
The planes crash, and when people are hurt and they're crying and they're worried and they're running.
You keep seeing that image?
Yeah.
Do you think you'll ever forget this?
No, because it's a moment when 5,000 people died.
So many died, 800 miles from where Tommy Ledford lives in Chicago. He's a 10-year-old who can no longer walk past the 100-story John Hancock building without thinking of the horror at the World Trade Center.
I was trying to imagine if a plane hit the John Hancock, how sad it would be. How many people would die.
They may still be playing games during the day, but at night, many are haunted by their fears.
I had a dream that I was in the lobby, and I was just sitting there, and then I heard something crash, and I couldn't get out, and then all the floors just toppled on top of me.
We hear it over and over again, see it in their young faces. Kids worried about what we used to take for granted.
I will be worried when my dad goes on vacation, but all I can do is hope that he doesn't get hurt.
There's fear of what they've seen and fear of what's yet to come.
If we start war, it could make a very big war, and we could be in this for years.
Since my father's in the Army, I watch a lot of war movies, and it's very, very scary, the war, because they can hide in the ground, and then when you're walking, you don't know what's going to happen.
We're little, we can't do anything about it. So it's real scary. It's more than any gun shooting. This can kill thousands or millions of people.
For young minds, that's overwhelming. Too much to absorb. In Berkeley, California, Chicago, Illinois, Summit, New Jersey, New York City.
I think we are very vulnerable because we cannot fight and we cannot handle guns or anything, so I feel non-safe, and I'm worried that I could die.
They're worried about themselves, but also worried about the pain and bloodshed to people who live far away, people they've never met. In Berkeley, we asked these 10 and 11-year-olds to tell us with a show of hands how many are against U.S. military retaliation. Virtually all of them.
Like, teachers tell us that if you get into a fight with someone at school, then you should try to talk it out.
I think we should think this out and see who did this and make peace.
President Bush is saying he wants this man dead or alive.
I think President Bush should make sure that that one man did it, and if they're sure, they should kill him, but we shouldn't go and bomb them because we don't want to be killing lots of innocent people like they want to do to us. That's just not right.
Well, you get that sense of the innocence that's lost. You see small children, they're answering you almost like young adults.
I cried
These are the children's parents. We showed them our interviews. Many say it's the first time they've really heard their kids' fears and anxieties.
I didn't sense they were afraid, but you know, I might have been missing something, it seems like.
I try to keep myself from crying every time I watch the news.
I try to tell her, you know, it's sad to say, but this is real. This isn't a movie.
Where I live at Fort Washington by the bridge, and I fear that one of the terrorists may drive on the bridge and blow it up.
I just explained to him, you know, we just have to have faith, we have to pray, and we can't live in fear, we just have to keep going on.
Well, I wish the guy who wanted to do it was never born, and our lives could be the same, and it'd be the same as always, and nothing would ever happen bad.
We're trying to make them feel safe when we don't necessarily feel that safe.
Child psychologists say don't despair. The children simply want to know that their world is safe. Kids 8 years old and younger don't want or need a lot of information. Older kids deserve more. And the experts say it's important to remind the children that the world is uniting against evil, that some good will come out of this. And above all, remember the kids take their cues from you. If you're calm and at ease, then they will be too.
What message do you have for President Bush and the American government?
Killing innocent civilians is not a good thing to do, and it's better that we believe we can get the people that actually did the harming than people that didn't do anything.
Yeah, I'm very proud to hear him say that. I think that retribution is very far from his mind, and that's the way he was brought up.
So what's the point in going back and taking revenge if you're just going to kill just as many people as in the World Trade Center?
Well, we might prevent this from happening again. That's the argument.
Well, it's just going to kill more people.
If something happens and civilians are killed, what do you say about right and wrong, and good and evil?
It's hard enough for adults to understand, but how will we ever know what it's doing to our kids? No easy answers. And yet there was something else we heard. Uncomplicated hope that it seems only a child can have.
Whenever something like this happens, we always come back and then get better and better. And I think America has a habit of learning from its mistakes and making itself a better place to live.
Have a wonderful night.
At the end of the day, it's a comforting thought.
Night.
Good night. Sleep tight.
After this long nightmare.
All was good to listen to the kids. President Bush said tonight to the Taliban in Afghanistan, you will hand over the terrorists or you will share their fate. When we come back, what would it be like to fight a war in Afghanistan? Who are the Afghanis and how have they defeated so many others in the past?
Hello? You have a patient. Who is this? She has a number locked in her troubled mind. I need that number. What's your worst fear, Nathan? We have your daughter.
Daddy.
Don't think. Wherever you go, you will be watched. Just get her back. I need you to help me. Don't question. Is it a telephone number?
No.
Is it a code? Michael Douglas.
You won't say what?
What is it? Don't say a word.
I'll never tell any of you.
Rated R. September 28th, only in theaters.
More. That's what you get with Verizon Wireless. Right now, you get 3,000 more night and weekend home airtime minutes, free every month for life. And there's more. Now through September 30th, get a Motorola StarTAC on sale for just $50. And get this great value in more places. Visit a Verizon Wireless communication store. Log on to VerizonWireless.com or call 1-800-2-JOIN-IN. So hurry in and get the Motorola StarTAC at our lowest price ever, only from Verizon Wireless. Join in.
It's allergy season again. Where should you turn for relief? Benadryl? Or the leading prescription? It may surprise you to know, medical studies prove histamine-blocking Benadryl to be a full 54% more effective than the leading prescription. 54% more effective at relieving even your worst allergy symptoms like runny noses. It's a real eye-opener, isn't it? Benadryl, proven 54% more effective.
You work on it.
You think on it.
You play on it.
It was kind of like this dream I'd always had.
Comforting. You entertain on it.
You use it. You spend your life on it. Shouldn't it be the furniture you've always wanted?
And now it's easy with the Simple Finance Plan, only at Ethan Allen.
They tried our refreshing blue flavor. They tried our minty green flavor. Then we told them both were Listerine. Cool Mint and Fresh Burst Listerine. All of Listerine's germ-killing power with great taste.
There's a place nearby with everything your vehicle needs to keep going in this busy world, even on Saturday. Oil changes, brakes, tires, and more, all in one convenient stop. Get Quality Care Auto Service at Ford, Lincoln, and Mercury dealerships.
It's Applebee's Fiesta del Grill. Lose yourself in our one and only lime marinated chicken. Or for a limited time, the sizzling Southwest steak skillet. Only at Applebee's. Who's grilling America's favorite sirloin steaks? Well, sink your teeth into our perfectly seasoned house sirloin and you'll know. It's got to be Applebee's. Eatin' good, eatin' good.
As details of this unthinkable tragedy unfold, stay with ABC News. Later tonight, a special Nightline with Ted Koppel. And tomorrow, turn to Good Morning America with Diane Sawyer and Charles Gibson for the first word of the day. Then World News Tonight with Peter Jennings for the very latest.
Beauty, talent, compassion. Values showcased as the Miss America tradition continues for its 81st historic year. 51 women will come together to compete for the glory of the crown. Miss America Live, hosted by Tony Danza, Saturday 8/7 Central on ABC. ABC Sunday, 9/8 Central. The Practice 2-hour movie event.
None of us has any idea how it happened.
He just showed up in your bed dead?
Yes. You'll be convicted, Senator.
Your silence could incriminate you.
You kill, you go to jail.
You are guilty in everybody's eyes.
Shut up!
I can't win this. People love me.
The Practice season premiere this Sunday at a special time, 9/8 Central on ABC.
Some people like their cars. And some people really like their cars. The 2002 Accord from Honda.
Now lease a 2002 Accord LX for $239 a month for 39 months.
You heard the president say tonight that Osama bin Laden and his gang are to terrorism as the mafia is to crime, and that his protectors, the Taliban leaders of Afghanistan, have brutalized the Afghan people. He specifically said, women not allowed to attend school. You can be jailed for owning a television. Well, you've probably heard a lot about the Taliban in recent days, but I want to bring you now a kind of reporter's notebook of my own, because in 1996, just after the Taliban took power and the civil war was still going on, I went to Afghanistan to see for myself just who these mysterious extremists really were.
The Bible says, sow the wind, reap the whirlwind. After 10 years of merciless struggle, the Soviet Union left Afghanistan in 1989. Soon, the Taliban would be the only ones left standing. Their first act was the public execution and hanging of the former president and his brother.
The Taliban, I think, are the leftovers of any very long-running war. The society is totally destroyed. The country is devastated. You get a generation of young people who know nothing but violence, nothing but war, and essentially these are the Taliban.
Back when I was there, they were roaming bands of young men in from the provinces, swarming the streets, mostly illiterate, all of them armed.
It's a Kalashnikov. Kalashnikov. Yeah, what sort is that? AK-47. All Afghans are basically trained to fight. They pick up a gun as a child would pick up a toy. They are sharpshooters by the time they're 6 or 7 years old.
We now know more about their implacable fundamentalism. Women made to cover themselves at all times or risk stoning. 5 years ago, these few brave women agreed to come into the room with us and remove their veils.
We've heard that some of the women have been beaten.
Yes, that's right.
I also sat with the Deputy Foreign Minister Mohammad Stanisky, who said that all the terrorist camps in Afghanistan were being shut down by the Taliban.
In our foreign policy, we have already declared that we are totally against terrorism in the world.
You've closed the camps here?
Anyone who is trying or who would like to use this country as a center for taking or carrying sabotage activities against others, we will never allow them. We are against them.
But in fact, from the terrorist camps, the Taliban found a patron, Osama bin Laden, who reportedly gave their impoverished government $3 million, and that was just for a start. By another account, he married his daughter to the mysterious Taliban leader, Mullah Muhammad Omar. He is rarely seen. He's only entered the capital, Kabul, a few times in the last 7 years, and suffering out in the countryside as they have long done, the 24 million Afghan people. 1 in 4 children die before they're 5. Cholera, typhoid run rampant. Stephanie Bunker works for the UN in Afghanistan.
The city of Kabul looks like the war zone that it was, meaning that it looks utterly bombed out. There's no telephones. The roads are unbelievably bad. Most Afghans don't know what electricity is. Almost no one has access to safe water. There was a point in this year where people in northern Afghanistan were willing to work for 38 cents a day.
The average lifespan is just 45 years old. And even before this crisis, millions were on the brink of famine.
They collect wild grasses to eat as famine foods that are neurotoxins, which can cause paralysis or can kill you. They are eating bread made out of wheat flour and ground dried locusts. It's something more than just an underdeveloped country.
The Taliban have become very unpopular over the last 2 years, I think. You know, even within their own ethnic group, people wanted simple economics and simple livelihood, jobs.
So if there is one clear villain, there may be many losers if the U.S. rains bombs on Afghanistan. I'll never forget what one of those brave women whispered to me through her veil. God go with you, she said, and tell the world our veils conceal our tears.
And Charlie, if history is any experience, it's worth pointing out again that the Taliban will fight to the death.
Well, if it is to be war, and if part or all of it is to be fought in Afghanistan, there are all kinds of questions being asked. What would be our objectives? How would we achieve them? And how do you fight in such forbidding territory where there may not be many hard targets to hit? So to look at such questions, we want to start with Robert Oakley, former U.S. ambassador to Pakistan and a counterterrorism expert.
But the Russians had a bad experience in Afghanistan. They were there for 10 years. It was their Vietnam.
Indeed it was. The lesson of history is you don't conquer Afghanistan. Access is too hard, the terrain too forbidding. Afghanistan is totally landlocked, surrounded by nations not always friendly to the United States. To move in, U.S. forces would either have to base in or cross over Iran to the west, Islamic republics to the north, or Pakistan to the south and east. But that's just the start of the problems. Once there, as the Soviets found when they tried to conquer the country, the ground itself is just as hostile as the Afghanis.
The terrain in Afghanistan is mountainous. Secondly, there are no roads. And thirdly, the inhabitants have nothing to lose but their lives.
Retired Soviet General Sergei Goncharov knows whereof he speaks. He was the deputy commander of the Alpha Force. That is the Russian equivalent of U.S. Special Forces. And he has given thought to the question, how do you get Osama bin Laden?
They will not capture him by rocket assaults and carpet bombing alone.
So if you can't get him from the air, you have to go in.
To this day, no one has been able to conquer Afghanistan, neither the English nor the Russians, and I don't believe the Americans will be able to.
I don't think we want to go in and occupy Afghanistan or any other area. I think we want to go in, do our business, and get out.
General Wayne Downing ran the U.S. Special Operations Command until 1996. The lessons cited by the Russians, he says, have been learned.
I would not advocate that we get involved in a ground war, in an occupation of Afghanistan like the Soviets did.
Military sources say we could see some kind of high-profile missile attack to launch the effort. But then, chances are, Americans won't even know about subsequent skirmishes. They will likely be carried out by the U.S. Special Operations Forces, secretly inserted in small teams. Sources tell ABC News they are already posted in that region of the world.
A lot of options that we had considered in the past to not only get Osama bin Laden, but also his lieutenants, were rejected. They were rejected because they were judged to be too risky. They were rejected because of collateral damage. This is not the case today.
The U.S. Special Operations teams could hide in rugged terrain for days, use the tactics of guerrillas themselves, but with far greater force. Their intent to capture or kill bin Laden or suspected members of his inner circle. They could also mark targets for future precision bombing raids, using weapons like lasers to guide bombs in from high overhead.
It might be a small office building. It could be an apartment. It could be a small village.
Another critical target probably won't take any bombs or troops at all. The terrorist lifeline, their money.
How they get money to the right places at the right time, how they get the right kind of equipment, how they raise their funds.
But in all of this, a caution that has to underlie military thinking and the thinking of civilian commanders. In whatever the United States undertakes, could it touch off a new wave of response, not just from terrorist networks, but from fundamentalist Muslims so far on the sidelines? Again, former ambassador to Pakistan, Robert Oakley.
As we've seen in the attack on the trade towers, they don't mind dying themselves. If they think it'll enhance the cause, they welcome death.
Next on Eyewitness News, late reaction to President Bush's dramatic address to Congress. Our Jim Dolan is in Washington. Also a look at what U.S. troops may do on the ground in Afghanistan. And should we rebuild the World Trade Center? Next.
He can barely chew. The pain's excruciating. He can squeeze you in tomorrow morning.
Saturday.
How about Monday?
This Saturday, the only place you want to be is the one store that can offer savings like these on brands like these. Sears, where else?
There's a different way to look at your money.
What's it say?
ING. It's not an ending. It's a beginning.
Hi, I'm Doug Flutie, pro football player and father of an autistic child. I started the Doug Flutie Jr. Foundation to help less fortunate families of autistic children get the support they need. Here's a way you can help. Just dial 1010-220. All calls up to 20 minutes are only 99 cents, and 1010-220 will make a donation to the Doug Flutie Jr. Foundation every time you use it. So dial 1010-220, get up to 20 minutes for only 99 cents, and help some great kids at the same time. It's a win-win situation.
Change for $1.
Sure. Introducing the all-new Chevy Avalanche. The only vehicle that changes from an SUV to a pickup.
Thanks.
Chevy Avalanche, like a rock.
We're going to turn now to ABC's Cynthia McFadden because she made a discovery that on every block in New York City, we're no longer 6 degrees of separation. Every single person is the person next door.
We all will know somebody who knows someone. I mean, but that's not so hard to do with the numbers involved.
Playwright John Guare first popularized the idea that all of us are surprisingly closely related in his hit, 6 Degrees of Separation.
I read somewhere that everybody on this planet is separated by only 6 other people.
This week in New York City, with more than 6,000 people missing or dead, the connections feel even closer. Call it 1 degree of separation. Guare himself knows 2 of the missing firemen. Have you cried?
Have I cried? No. It's beyond tears.
And for Guare, a painful irony. This young actor in the film of 6 Degrees lost his mother, a passenger on the second plane to hit the World Trade Center.
Cynthia, this is James Watson, who's been working down there,
We set out to explore this 1 degree of separation in just one city block, the block where Guare lives, 5th Avenue between 11th and 12th. From his window, the First Presbyterian Church, Reverend Lindley DeGarmo.
We have 5 members and friends of the family who are still missing.
Including 2 mothers who have not come home.
Both have two children in the sort of 9, 10, 12, 14 age range.
From the street in front of the church, he watched the towers collapse.
I've never seen anything so horrible. It took the wind out of me. There couldn't be any more of a face of the devil than was there looking up 5th Avenue at us.
And yet, he says he wants to be here now, as does John Guare.
A friend called from Washington. He said, I'll be up with a truck. We'll evacuate you and Adele. We'll get you out of there. I said, evacuate? Where would you want to go?
Nowhere is his answer. And if that is hard for those outside this city to understand, take a walk around his neighborhood.
Every wall, payphone, just covered with these color Xeroxes. Have you seen? Do you know? Last seen? Missing?
Guare says these smiling faces in wedding gowns at graduations have brought the living closer.
Everybody in these pictures was looking at someone that they loved who was taking the picture. So we're in the position of being that loved one.
Back on 5th Avenue, hear the neighbors talk about their connections to the tragedy.
My husband works on Wall Street, so there were a few people that we're still searching for, which is very sad.
I just heard of a friend's sister's boyfriend. He's missing, so, it's been horrible.
Guare has little patience with those who now feel living their daily lives is frivolous.
That's self-pity. All we have is our lives. All we can do is go back to work. We are our times. We don't change ourselves. That's what it is that we have to go back to. That is our anchor that we have to return to.
Perhaps it's not surprising that this man who has spent his life finding just the right words looks for comfort now to the poets.
Auden wrote this poem, the gist of which is we must love one another or die. And that's the greatest work we can do.
And as the city starts to live again, you hear that idea over and over in the poetry of the street.
Hi, Ann. How are you? You know, at street corners, people just saying, how are you holding up? You know what the message is. Are you okay? Are you there? Are you all right? Yes, I am. I'm as fine as you are.
No man an island on the island of New York. Well, I'm Diane Sawyer. Don't forget Nightline and Ted Koppel coming up later, and Charlie and I will see you again in the morning.
On Good Morning America. Good program, that. I'm Charles Gibson. One final thought tonight. The president said tonight that Americans have been moved by the messages of condolence coming from the rest of the world. So we're going to leave you tonight with one such message from Sarah McLachlan, singing from her home in Vancouver, Canada. Good night.
I will remember you. Will you remember me? Don't let your life pass you by. Weep not for memories. I'm
The ABC television network extends its thoughts and prayers to those who suffer.
Because you have so much experience talking to kids, to give us some sort of sense about what you think we ought to be telling them and not telling them.
I think of my grandson, Alexander, who's 12. And the first thing he said to his mom when he heard about the rumblings in New York City, he said, "Are Yeye and Baba all right?" Now that's my wife and me. That's what he calls his grandparents. And only in the last few years did his other two grandparents die. And so he brought his own history to what he was hearing. And that's what we all do. We all bring our own inner life to the news that's presented to us.
Sometimes that's good, though, and sometimes that can present a problem depending on what our inner life is.
Exactly. But once he knew that we were all right, he went right back to his play. And he got to hear our voices the next day. And his mother said that he was fine about that. I heard about a third-grade teacher who yesterday tried to explain to her third-grade class what was happening and why so many people were so concerned. And after it was all over, she wasn't too graphic about it, but she was quite particular with these, well, they would have been maybe 10 and 11-year-olds. And when it was all over, one little girl said to her, "Whew, I am so relieved. I thought you were going to tell us that we had lice." She was so concerned that because it happens, some of these children have very long hair, and some schools develop lice, and she was so afraid that she was going to be sent home.
That was her biggest problem in the world up until then.
Exactly. And that's the thing that's so important for us to remember, that children are thinking about what's happening to them and those who are closest to us. And a 4-year-old boy came with his dad this morning to my office, and his dad said he didn't think that he knew too much about what was going on. They didn't show the television in their homes, which pleased me. And I talked with him. First of all, he was moving a great deal while his dad was talking about the tragedies. And I said, "You know, my mother used to tell us whenever there was something that was really scary in the news, look for the helpers. You'll always find the helpers in the sidelines." And I said, "Have you seen any people who were helping a lot lately?" And the little boy went like that. And his father started talking about all of those who have come forth and made such a display of grace at this time. And I noticed how that little boy started to calm down and sit so quietly. He knew that there were those who would take care.
You mentioned in passing that you were happy that people weren't exposing their children too much of the televised images of this tragedy. You think that's important?
I do, Gwen. I think it's very important. Very young children would have a terribly difficult time assimilating all of that scary stuff. They might think that it was pretend, of course, but it's not resolved. Many of the programs that they see have conflict, but by the end, usually those conflicts are resolved. This conflict is not resolved.
You know, one of the things that we're all struggling with as adults, and as adults who have children in our lives, is trying to figure out what's the correct language to use. How do you talk about this, assuming your children are old enough to know what's going on? How do you speak?
Well, we talk a lot on our neighborhood about what do you do with the mad that you feel. And I have a feeling that that's one of the things that we must continue to work on. There are many ways to express anger, many ways that don't hurt us or anybody else. And kids can be overwhelmed by their anger if they don't feel that they've got some way to express it. When I was a kid, you know, I'm glad to be sitting here at the piano. I used to. I could cry through the tips of my fingers. I could laugh. I could really be angry at the piano, on the piano. I have a grandson who can express wonderful feelings through dance. Every time I play, he dances out what he's feeling. You know, there are people who are able to sculpt, people who are able to paint. There are wonderful ways that people can deal with their feelings without hurting themselves or anybody else.
Another important part that we have to figure out how to cope with is how to speak in words of tolerance. A lot of the early adult anger has been directed toward groups of people or people who look like the enemy. How do adults regulate their speech so they are sending the correct messages to children?
I like to think of us human beings as one family, and to be able to help children, and very young children really think that, you know, that we're all related. It takes a lot of careful training for very young children to be prejudiced. And they're just, you are special is a song that we often sing. You are my friend, you are special. And to think that the person who is near you is your neighbor, and that person has unique qualities that nobody else in the whole world has. There's one other thing I need to tell you, and that is that adults need care too. There are a lot of adults who are constantly helping children these days, hour after hour, in an atmosphere that's very, very difficult. And those adults really need to have people that they can hug and cry with. And I think people who are constantly helping others through thoughtful television programs like yours need help too right now.
Well, Fred Rogers, thank you for coming out of retirement to share your thoughts for us. It's very reassuring for those of us who've known you and watched you over the years. Mr. Rogers, thank you very much.
Thank you, Gwen.
Now joining us from Boston is pediatrician and author T. Barry Brazelton. Dr. Brazelton, I want you to pick up where Fred Rogers left off, especially the part about anger. Tonight we started off by listening to the president speak about what he's going to do to retaliate. A lot of Americans are feeling grief and anger. How do we stop that from polluting our children?
Well, I'm so glad, Gwen, you're finally looking at what's happening to children, because we're going to pay a big price for all of this with our children. They aren't reacting, as Fred said, right away. They're hiding it, almost as if they were protecting their parents from what they feel in their parents, the anger, and all of the pain that we're all going through. But they're saving it for later, and they're going to have some syndromes, post-traumatic syndromes later on, that we must recognize. They'll regress, they will have symptoms, and we must recognize them, support them through that. And I think that the anger that's going on now is something that children find it very hard to live with. That's not, they're trying to learn to control their anger already, and to see adults who are out of control, or a country that's out of control, is just about as frightening as I think it could be for children.
Well, I know there are some folks there with you in Boston who have questions for you, so I'll turn this over to Emily Rooney.
Thank you, Gwen. Dr. Brazelton, I was wondering, is it
Is it impossible to be too direct with children? They're very curious. They have a morbid curiosity. I was listening yesterday to a firefighter who had just come back from New York, and he was trying to explain to his 7 or 8-year-old boy about bodies he had seen. Is it okay to be honest about that?
Well, I think you have to take into account how their age, how much they can really absorb. They've been exposed to a lot of this already from Hollywood, and so this isn't anything new to them, but for it to come to reality and to see their parents as upset as they are, I think puts it in another category right away. So I think, yes, we can be too direct with kids, and I would tend to protect them. I'd cut down on how much television they watch. The things that I think would really help is to be very structured, to have breakfast with them, supper with them every day. To discipline is very critical right now. Discipline is reassuring to
Don't
children.
we give them mixed signals? The one point we're telling them there's the bad guys out there, the people who want to maybe touch them sexually or lure them here and there. And so we want to give them a message about who might be the bad guy, but suddenly we're saying we don't want to point to somebody who's wearing a turban, who has an Arabic accent, but at the same time we're giving them other signals about who's the bad guy.
Well, this is the biggest danger that I know of, that we're going to create more feeling about diversity. We haven't done very well in this country anyway, and now to layer it on so people with diversity are dangerous or bad or any of the things that the children feel about themselves anyway, is really adding to the problems that we're going to have to face in the future. I think what Fred said about we're all one big family, and you know what we're feeling right now is a real love in this country for each other. Let's create that for our children.
Well, on that point, Ken Duckworth, you were at Logan's Hilton Airport last week when families this had just happened. They were coming there some of them were coming there to hear what had happened to their loved ones on those airplanes. But what were the children saying to you at that time?
Well, I think the short answer to that is really there's a psychological warfare engaged in this process, which I think we have all underestimated. We think about these images and the terror. This is a psychological warfare that the adults in my life, the professionals, my colleagues, are struggling with. And then we're asking children to negotiate this world at the same time. I'd like to make a comment about 2 groups of people that I was so taken with in my travels last week. One were the lower school teachers of America, who I think we owe a tremendous debt of gratitude to. These people got the information about these children, how to negotiate this information, and they had none of the advantages the rest of the adults have had, which was to talk about it incessantly their entire day, and how to figure out how to use this information in a way that was thoughtful and to keep the structure and the support for kids. I think the American teachers have been undersold in this, and I think the airline industry, who I spent some time with individuals from the airline industry, they are in the same role that the parents are at. They're having to reassure people when it's very difficult to reassure ourselves.
Well, let me bring a teacher into this. Rosie Kamal, you are a director of a nursery school in Brookline. Those are young children. Are they asking you about this every day?
Not every day, and I feel that their ages 3 to 5, so a few of them have said a few things about it, but by and large, not very much about it. And I feel that it's really imperative that we keep nurturing their own lives and that we nurture community among ourselves here and with everyone across the whole world. And I think that that's just vital for all of us if we are to really survive as a species across the whole world.
And this is coming. You know, they aren't talking about it yet, but they will. And they'll regress and show us that they've suffered through this just like we have.
You know, the other interesting angle on this, and Evan, maybe you could speak to it, is the elderly. I mean, people who have already lived through World War II and they're in their 80s and upwards, and you're